Suhaka Kewaha. Hello, welcome everyone. Kasaikla yechat duasak Amanda Bremner achsaich city. Tlenget ayachat yaukdat dach aya. Degayakak yechat diati. Native Movement ach ye janei with Deputy Director Tlenganilchish ach eti saai. Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to our in-person folks here at the Akela Space, and also welcome to our virtual participants. We are live streaming on our social medias, so welcome, welcome. I am Kasai Kla, or Amanda Bremner. I am Tlingit, originally from Southeast Alaska, from the community of Yakutat. I currently live in Degayakak, or Denaina Ani here in Anchorage, and I am the Deputy Director at Native Movement. Thank you for joining all of us today. You have probably heard of Native Movement, but for a quick recap, Native Movement is a 501c3 dedicated to building people power rooted in indigenized worldview toward healthy, sustainable, and just communities for all. We support grassroots-led projects that align with our vision that endeavor to ensure social justice, indigenous peoples' rights, and the rights of Mother Earth. And I want to do a quick gratitude for all of our staff and our board in the room. I think we have a couple of board members. I see Oliver. Hi, Oliver. I thought I saw, did I see Melinda? No? And Doug and Amy on our advisory board up here in the front. Hi. And all of our amazing staff who made this happen, and our comms team, seen and unseen. Thank you. Yeah, a few logistical things. There's lots of food in the back, catered by Sis's, and some of our team helped to make the salmon. And in the front, we have a sign-in sheet and some resources. And then over here by the door, we have kind of a fish rack. If you have burning questions for our panelists, there are markers. You can, stewarded by Sunny over there, where you can walk up and write your questions. And there's also in the back, it's a little bit hard to see, but a prompt is, do you know how to access your corporation's bylaws? So we're going to save a little bit of time after the panel to kind of gather into groups and have more discussion. That's not live streamed. So stay. If you have time and feel called, please stay around for that. We also have some resources at this back table for how to access your corporation's shareholder relations. And we have some information back there for drop locations and donations for some of our relatives in Western Alaska who had to flee their homes because of the typhoon. So there is more information on that back table for that. And if it feels okay, I would love to just take a moment. I know it's been a little bit quiet this morning, but just to take a quick moment together to just send our good medicine and thoughts and energy towards everyone who has had to leave their home for someplace new. Goodness, Chish. I know there's lots of really good opportunities to help support in lots of different ways. Okay, well, we have a really good panel planned for today. And I do want to share, this will not be the first and only panel. This is a spark for a discussion around shareholder empowerment. So we've got some fantastic panelists here to share their knowledge and experience with us. And afterwards, we'll have space for some live Q&A and also we'll answer some questions from our live stream. So if you are watching virtually, go ahead and put your question in the comments. We've got someone monitoring the comments, and we'll make sure to get your question in. Okay. And before we hear our panelists introduce themselves in their own words, I did want to share a couple of definitions. So when we talk about Alaska Native values, the ones that we're referring to today are the traditional values of Alaska that have been adopted by each region. And there is a poster on the very back wall that lists those out by region. So our goal when we speak about Alaska Native values, it's not our personal values, it's not our values as Native movement, but really it's about uplifting and empowering each of the folks in these regions to uplift their values. And when we speak about shareholder empowerment, really what we're talking about is the transformation from a passive beneficiary to an active steward, recognizing that ANCSA shareholders aren't just beneficiaries, but Indigenous peoples with unique rights to ensure their corporations serve both economic prosperity and ensuring the preservation of our ways of life for current and future generations of shareholders. Oh, this might sound familiar. You're concerned about something and you're sharing it with a fellow shareholder, and we hear, yeah, that's terrible, it's bad, it's awful, but what can we do about it? So it's shifting from being a passive beneficiary to really being engaged and knowing our pathways to being able to help inform and influence these systems that sometimes feel really, really big. So thank you all for joining this discussion. I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to my panelists so we can hear about them in their own words. We'll go this way.
Ganashish Yedeka Kudahan Yuchat Duasak Yeth Nachatsiti Tluknachari Ayachat Hishchit Dach Yakda Kwan Yechat Yeti. My Tlingit name is Yedeka Kudahan. I am Raven from the Tluknachari clan of the Frog House. I live in Yakutat. My English name is Mary Knutsen. I work for the Yakutat Tlingit tribe, but I am also the vice president of our village ANCSA Corp, Yakutat Kwan.
Hello there, I'm David Leslie. I'm a Inupiaq. My mom is from Kotzebue, but her and I were both raised in Fairbanks. I'm in the process of reconnecting with my Native family, especially through trying to get Nana to change some of their investments. I've met family I didn't even know I had. I have a history in film and journalism. I'm on the board of a few nonprofits in Fairbanks, both environmental and social justice. And I'm very excited to be here and to figure out how we can work together as shareholders and make these corporations do ethical things.
I'm a short one, so I might adjust this. Kluksha Yuhat Duasak, Chakna Hutsati, Wasanadi Ayahat, Tlingit, and Irish and Polish Ayahat. My name is Chloey Cavanaugh. My Tlingit name is Kluksha, which comes from a story of women working really hard to get things done really quickly, or woman who moves mountains. I'm a small business owner out of Juneau, Alaska. My family is from Keeksquan, Cake, Alaska. I've been running my business since 2020, but I've lived in Juneau my whole life. Through being in Juneau my whole life, you kind of naturally become a little bit of an activist in your community because you love it and you want to see it thrive.
Shalom
Shoji MacKenzie Englishoe Oji Gwichauge Gwatsan Ikli. My name is MacKenzie Englishoe. I'm from Gwichauge. My family comes from Gwichauge and Canyon Village on the Yukon and Porcupine River. And I am the chair of the Emerging Leaders Youth Advisory Council. But at the end of the day, I'm just a girl and who has a dream and a vision for the land and our people. So thank you for having me.
We'll go ahead and get started. Our first question is what access or rights do ANCSA Corporation shareholders have that they may not realize? Let's start here. You can go ahead, Mary.
You want me to? So in my experience, a lot of our shareholders weren't aware that they had the right to request all of the corporation's documents. A lot of older folks might know that, but our shareholders those shares are starting to go to their children and their descendants, and they aren't fully aware of their ability to do that. So it's something I try to make sure I inform our new shareholders of. They're allowed to request minutes. They're allowed to request our financials if they're not being released regularly like they're supposed to be. They are allowed to request the bylaws, our articles of incorporation, which should also be on the State of Alaska's website to access. And they're also supposed to be able to access those where they are legible. In the past, I have had the experience that my corporation's articles of incorporation are not legible, even on the state's website. So those are important things for us as shareholders to be able to read and understand so that we know our rights as shareholders within the corporation. In that, we also have the right to gather as shareholders to propose resolutions. And as long as you have it depends on your specific corporation's bylaws, but I think it's a minimum of 25% of shareholder support. Those are allowed to be brought to your board of directors at a meeting to be passed or not passed. And you also have the right to call meetings for your corporation with the support of a certain percentage of your shareholders. For some of our villages, that may be difficult, but there are a lot of pathways in which you can try to find the shareholders and reach out to them. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a question later today, but in that, you also have the right to request the full list of shareholders from your corporation. And if they aren't complying with those regulations that have been set forth, you are able to report them to the state of Alaska. I think those are a lot of the biggest things that I learned in running for our board of directors and then also pass on to shareholders. So.
And one thing I'd like to add is there's a lot more of the financial information that should be accessible to shareholders. Often what is given at the annual meeting or in the annual report is very rudimentary, and we should be able to know how much are the executive directors of subsidiaries making, how much is going to staff and wages for executive people compared to what is bringing in for profit. And because they tried to, a lot of times you look at it and it seems like the numbers are there and it's fine, but you can get a lot more information about how things are actually being run and what resources are being allocated. And that also reflects the values of the corporation, because they will say one thing and it might be different once you actually get the full breakdown, and you have to ask for those documents. And once you start asking for them, when you start asking for things, people will act differently. It's usually not a good thing when people start asking. But the more we ask, the safer it is for everyone. So trying to work together to get all these shareholders to recognize their rights and to act as a block rather than a few individuals is really necessary.
Chish, thank you both. I think one of the things that I learned, Mary and I co-founded the Shareholder Coalition in Yakutat, is that our corporations not settling their estates and distributing shares can be a really big barrier to being able to get the right numbers. Mary mentioned getting a petition or a resolution or something that can be voted on by the delegation is 10% of voting shares. So not shareholders, but voting shares. And if we don't have those distributed where a lot are still being held by folks who have passed on and their shares haven't been distributed, that can be really challenging to get the numbers and signatures that you need to be able to move the needle a little bit. Thank you both. The next question we have, what examples have you seen of ANCSA corporations successfully integrating Indigenous values of Alaska into modern business operations? For this one, I'm going to pass the mic on down to you, MacKenzie.
While I want to recognize that there's a lot of opportunities in the oil and gas industry and the mining industry, not all of our shareholders want futures in those paths. It's important that we start investing in broader diversity and diversify our training opportunities for our people, and that includes corporate, administrative, professional development. Creating a pathway that for all of our people, especially those who might not want to work in the pipeline or in industrial sectors, is really, really important for building out the future we want to build. And I want to be very, very clear that not everything that Doyon does aligns with our value. And in fact, a lot of the time it doesn't. And I believe that they need to get better at that, truly honoring the voices of our elders and listening to the voices of our youth and hearing what type of future that they want to achieve. As they are acting now, they're acting as if that they're sovereign entities when they're not. Our tribes are the sovereign entity. Our people are the sovereign entity. And they really need to start thinking about that. I mean, we could use the example of what's happening with the Hill Corp deal in the Yukon Flats. They promised my people on my ancestral lands that outside hunters won't be coming into our area to affect our foods, when there was a huge influx of hunters after the first summer that they started drilling. And then they have helicopters in Birch Creek, and those helicopters going to and from all the time is scaring all the moose away. And Birch Creek, that whole area being a traditional hunting ground, people weren't able to get their moose. Our local tribal citizens weren't able to get their moose, while these outside workers were coming in and getting moose with these big boats that a lot of our people don't have, with a bunch of guns, a bunch of men, and they could afford all the gas that they can, while we're struggling to uphold that for ourselves. In reality, they have been really blatantly ignoring our people about how we want, or that we don't want this. And it's affecting our salmon, our moose, our hunting and our fishing. Like I was saying, a lot of people weren't able to get their moose, and that's really, really important for our people to be able to feed themselves throughout the winter. Something I do sort of like that Doyon is doing is the Doyon Foundation, where they're working on language revitalization efforts for our people, which is a really big thing, since there's a lack of organizational efforts to help us hold on to our language and to continue to speak it and pass it on to the next generations. But I also think that Doyon has a responsibility to help those that are already doing the work and really putting their efforts toward language I guess I think about it in the way is, how is Doyon helping our community and our tribal citizens with the work that they're already doing and not separating it from our people? So, Masi.
Masi MacKenzie. I'm so thankful that MacKenzie was able to join us on our panel so that we can really uplift our youth voices, our youth in the space. And you've probably noticed a lot of our panelists are descendants. That is intentional. A lot of this space of shareholder empowerment really is finding spaces to uplift afterborns or descendant shareholders who have may or may not have been enrolled with descendant shares. So thank you, MacKenzie. Really happy you're here. And Mary, for the same question, what examples have you seen of ANCSA Corporation successfully integrating indigenous values of Alaska into modern business operations?
So while I am a shareholder of Yakshakwan, I also hold shares as a descendant with our regional corp, Sea Alaska. And I kind of want to focus on Sea Alaska. While there's a lot of criticism that they face, I do want to point out that they are working to move away from some of their extractive practices that they've had in their business models for so long. They've moved away from logging, going towards carbon credits. When they do have to log lands, one of the things I really appreciate is that they've started to let artists know ahead of time that they have to cut these cedar trees down and allow them to go harvest the bark from them so it doesn't go wasted. That's a really big thing for us, especially with cedar, yellow cedar, becoming more fragile in our environment. Sea Alaska also founded the Sea Alaska Heritage Institute, which focuses basically solely on language and culture and our arts. They are wonderful about reaching out to villages to host classes there. Sea Alaska's biennial celebration event brings millions into the economy of Juneau. It brings us all together as villages to see one another when we don't regularly get that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, guys. And then Sea Alaska itself also has a fund in which they fund language, not just for Tlingit and Haida people, but for Tsimshian people. And as many people know, the Tsimshian chose to go with a reservation model, so they're not part of ANCSA. They don't have to be included on anything that Sea Alaska does. However, taking care of one another is one of our values in Southeast, and it's really important to honor the fact that they have been there with us for so much of our journey in Southeast Alaska. It would be harmful to our cultures and to our values to leave them out of the things that we do revolving our language and our culture and our arts.
One of the most exciting things I saw NANA do was during the Alaska Film Incentive Program, they opened up a Pixic film studio, and they were working on animated feature films, and that was so exciting. Unfortunately, they did shut down the studio after the film incentive program ended, but it was the fact that they were investing in something that was renewable and could, help us as storytellers and to tell our story as Inupiaq people. I hope they bring it back. It's a renewable resource. It's not destructive. It is so important to have other investments outside of oil, gas, mining, and, federal contracts.
Sheesh. Thank you all for sharing those really inspiring things. I feel like in this day and time, there is a lot of advocacy called for within resist and reform spaces. So it's really nice to hear good stories of how our values are already being uplifted. For this next question, I wanted to share a little bit of background. I asked Yedika Kudahan, Mary Knutsen to be part of this panel because together, along with Violet here in the audience, we started the Yaukdat Chitinki Coalition in 2023 in our community, essentially to, well, actually, let me do a little bit of background first. In 2019, the Yakutat Quanar Village Corporation in Yakutat took out $15 million in loans to start a yak timber, a timber harvesting company. And when they announced plans to harvest timber from Kantak, one of our barrier islands, and Humpback Creek, the community, shareholders, non-shareholders, and businesses were in an uproar because of all of the things that would happen if our barrier islands were taken out. It would open us up to all of the weather in the Gulf, and our community wouldn't be safe. Similar things that are happening in other parts of Alaska right now, our community would have been much more susceptible to. So in response, a group of us formed a coalition that was fiscally sponsored by Native Movement. It's the first time I heard of a Native Movement, and I'm so glad that we did. With their support for fiscal sponsorship, we were able to accept donations and fundraise and secure a lawyer. And with the help of legal counsel, after weeks of strategizing, we settled on a strategy of soliciting a proxy and forcing the corporation to hold a meeting. And we ended up being successful. We won in court, and the judge ruled in our favor. And it was, as far as we know, the first organized shareholders group to successfully take an Alaska Native corporation to court and win. So our proxy slate was elected. That's how Violet and Mary and myself, and I just saw Keith Howard walk in. He's also on our board. That's how we were able to be successful. And it was a long process, lots of months of shareholder organizing. And with this next question, I wanted to open it up to Mary, because the key to our success was that outreach and talking to every single shareholder. And so this next question is, what pathways do shareholders have when they feel their corporations are doing business with potentially non-ethical industries? So, Mary, can you share with us a little bit about your experience with organizing with the coalition?
Yeah, so like Amanda said, this was a very stressful, kind of drawn out process. You know, we had to come up with a slate of candidates, first of all, that people would be willing to vote for and elect onto this board. The second part was getting people to care, because a lot of our shareholders don't vote regularly, if at all. I know that the last time they had elections, they had to hire contractors to go out door to door in our own community to get them to respond to their proxies and get them submitted. So on my part, what I volunteered to do as part of this coalition was shareholder outreach. Once we were finally able to get the list of shareholders, I looked up every shareholder on Facebook to see if I could find them. Granted, a lot of original shareholders are elders. They are likely not on Facebook. Also, a lot of them have left our community, so we don't know if they're still alive most of the time. We don't know if some of these people's names are unfamiliar to us. We don't necessarily know who they're descended from. So So I actually went on Ancestry.com and searched public records. And once I thought I found that person, I even searched marriage records on there, actually, to see if any of these people had potentially been married, rough birth dates, all of that. I was being a very intense internet sleuth, and thankfully, I was able to contact about 90% of our current shareholders. Once we were able to get a meeting called, the holdover board did basically everything possible to not let that meeting happen. And it was really discouraging. They told us we didn't meet quorum with their vote auditor there. That was also very discouraging. However, I had gone through our shareholder list and documented with news articles and personal knowledge every single person who had been deceased on that shareholder list, and they were actually counting those votes against us, which isn't allowed. So we had barrier after barrier with this meeting, and thankfully I had done all that work on documenting these deceased people. So when we finally did take our corporation to court, we had that backup on each of these individuals being deceased, whether it was a simple message from their child or niece or nephew, their spouse, or news articles relating to their deaths. We were able to have that as backup to show the judge, these shares were counted against us. They aren't allowed to do that per the last bylaws that we know of that were approved by the board of directors. No other bylaws have been brought to the shareholders since then, so we have to go by this being our knowledge base. And thankfully the judge ended up agreeing with us. So like I said, it's a lot of different things we had to do in order to get people to us, just to find out where they were. The part about caring about what was going on, we decided in discussing this with the coalition that we had to be very fact-based in this. We couldn't be putting our emotions into talking about what was going on, because a lot of us locals were really angry about the logging that was happening. But that didn't serve our purpose in getting this election to happen. So essentially, in reaching out to our shareholders, it was a very fact-based message. This is what they're doing. They haven't held elections in 3 years. They're required to hold elections. They haven't done audits in 3 years. We're trying to get a new board in place so we can get our corporation back in good standing. Can we get you to vote your proxy? Thankfully, with this, we were able to get all of the votes that we needed in order to overturn the board and then for the judge to agree with us. So if you're concerned about your corporation not having these ethical business practices, there are ways to get the turnover to happen that you need to happen. And it might be a lot of work. For us, it really was. But if it matters enough to your people, to the group that you have together, it's really worth it to do all of that footwork to be able to get the outcome that you desire.
Thank you, Mary. For our next question, Mary set us up really well. The next question is, how do you identify and connect with other shareholders who share your values and concerns?
All right. Just want to clarify, everything I shared today is as a Sealaska shareholder. I think the best way to stay connected, which some other people might disagree with, I think social media is a great way to stay connected, especially in these modern times, as not many of us are residing in Alaska. A lot of us have moved out of state and are all over. And some of those Facebook groups can be constructive. Also, creating the spaces where you find shareholders with shared values and want to advocate for the same things. Find those people and create Zoom meetings, create Google Meets, whatever you have to do to make sure your voice is brought back to your corporation. Create those spaces, find those people, and the work will just speak for itself. So find your people.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Social media is a pretty powerful tool, especially in connecting with others. Platforms like Facebook are places where shareholders already are, and talking in posts and groups and comments on Doyon's page, you can see the patterns of people raising similar concerns, which we all know from the Doyon regions, and issues of transparency, language, land use, youth engagement, and leadership accountability. But when you see those shared issues, it's easier to reach out and say, hey, let's work together on this. Or just to even check in with one another and keep the conversation going is really critically important. Another way people stay connected is attending shareholder events. And not just the annual meeting, but smaller events as well. Keep in mind I'm a student, so I am pretty busy. But that's usually where you can tell who's there with good intentions and a good heart and a good vision, and who's there for short-term monetary profit. And one person I want to bring up is, I'm aware that one of Doyon shareholders, Rochelle Adams of Fort Yukon and Beaver, has a role in and supporting protection efforts for the Yukon Flats, including social media channels like community Facebook groups. She's been super active in advocating against the oil and gas exploration in the flats, amplifying the voices of our people out there, connecting our shareholders, and pushing for accountability of Doyon's leadership. Her work on these online platforms, raising awareness, sharing updates, promoting community advocacy, serves as a model for how we can use digital platforms to organize around land and culture and our rights and voices as shareholders today. And for me, identifying and connecting with shareholders who share the values and concerns I do usually starts from within community, within the family, within friends, within the people I grew up with across the region. We talk at community gatherings over the phone, or even when we just see each other back at home. And those conversations are often the most honest, and that's where the feelings are shared, and about what's working and what's not working, and what we want to envision and what we can do about it. And I think we all want the same core things as shareholders. We want to protect the land. We want to protect the language. We want to continue our culture in any way that we can, and make sure that the next generation has more sustainable opportunities than we did, because we have the choice to decide that. And that's a really, really important and powerful thing to realize, that we do have the choice. And when I meet with other shareholders, especially those who are already speaking out or stepping into leadership roles, I think it's really important that we support them in however way that we can, thank them for what they're doing, because it's not easy sometimes. And personally, I'm just thankful for what they're doing for the future generations, so that they could have what we have, or more opportunities for a better future. So, Masi.
Masi, Ganeshchish, MacKenzie. Our next question is, which issues have you experienced when challenging corporate practices, and how did you navigate it?
I would say, I was an intern for my corporation for 3 years, and some of the challenges calling out some of the issues that we see within our communities or our corporations, is that fear is a powerful tool. And we're seeing what that's doing to shareholders, and we're seeing what that is causing in our leadership. And when you start challenging the way things are going in your corporation, it can be a very isolating experience. You start losing your friendships. You start having leadership that they may hold positions on the board, or they may operate in high up positions in your corporations, but it's just not that. They're also on other boards. They also control other things. So when you start naming the issues that you're seeing, they come after you, and they make it really difficult to speak up and say the truth. Truth has become an insult to our corporations instead of being seen as a gift of honesty and a way to move forward. So I think we're seeing that fear spread, and our leadership's afraid to speak up for us, and we're afraid to speak up for what we'll lose in the process, but we're already actively losing it by staying silent, and we're watching it impact people who lose their jobs. They lose their community because they become the martyr for saying what's not working, which we all see. And I think that's a big cultural shift that we're seeing of, we highlight these beautiful stories that sound really nice of Raven, kind of broke the rules and let out the light, and we all benefit from that. But we don't hear a lot of stories about the difficult things Raven did, the ways in which he was not a perfect character in that story, but those are real stories too. And we used to tell those stories, not just the good ones, not just the pretty ones, but we told the stories of when people messed up, when people had hard lessons, when there were those difficulties. And our Native corporations need to do that as well, be able to tell the full story of what it means to be imperfect, what it means to move forward, and what it means to see that our voices are going to propel them forward if they let that happen. And the silencing is going to do more damage than it will create the community we hope to see. With any relationship we have with each other, with our corporations, within our community, what's going to bring us closer is that honesty with each other. You can't form a relationship out of lies. You cannot form a relationship out of control. You can't form a relationship out of pretending to be perfect. It's the humanness that our corporation has to show and allow access for our voices to be shared. Even sitting here right now, I'm sure my corporation's clutching their tanaz and thinking it's an act of defiance and concern for what I'll say. And we shouldn't feel like that. We should feel like there are the spaces to speak up and say the things that need to be said so that we can move forward together, not leaving people behind when they name the hurts and the harms and the way our corporation should be accountable. There are leaders, we elect them, they have to be there sharing our voice too. We are the votes that put them there. We're the voices that are going to lift them up. They need to lift us up too.
Sheesh, Chloe, sharing that. I think one of the things that feels really important in this time and place is that there are kind of two things happening at the same time, right? Like there's the structure and the formality that is happening that our corporations have to adhere to in their fiduciary responsibility, and there's this growing need to hold ourselves to a higher social and cultural standard. And I see that with our descendants and this generation that is growing more and louder. And there's, I would love to, if you don't mind, I would love to hear more from you and kind of what you see as opportunities to continue nourishing that and nourishing those relationships. And our last question is, beyond annual meetings, what are the ongoing opportunities throughout the year to influence Alaska Native Corporation direction? But I think it's more about how do we continue nourishing these relationships with one another and being in good community so that when we have these conversations or approach our leaders about accountability, it's coming from a place of love, not from a place of judgment. Mind sharing more? Yeah. Great.
You know, I think when it comes to naming that accountability for our leadership and the things that we're naming that are issues within our communities, I think it becomes really easy that our Indigenous leadership are people we love and care about. They're not just elected leaders, they're people in our community, so it becomes really, really hard to name those issues and call attention to them. But I think the biggest issue we're seeing with calling for that accountability and that being received is we don't trust each other. Our corporations don't trust us. It takes trust to hear feedback and receive that. And right now, these are being taken as personal attacks instead of you can do something with something you're told. If someone's upset with me, I have to know they're upset to be able to fix it. How do we know what to fix if it's not brought to us? How do we know what to fix if our corporation won't sit with us in it? And I think it's naming what their fears are. What are their fears if people know that they messed up? What are their fears if they maybe made a bad decision? What are their fears around losing community? Will we be a stronger community if we can just name what we're seeing? You know, with our corporations, we've had excessive force on wanting to remove that transparency. And we've seen it in little moments of turning off comments on posts and trying to prevent the spaces to be able to reach out to our board or to have the time to ask questions. And I think we need to advocate more for that transparency and eliminate the fear around sometimes difficult feedback to hear. Through some of the issues, you know, what we've done is we've signed letters together as a community and had many names on it. And that's created less isolation, less fear. And we need people to be less afraid because people are standing alone right now and people are scared. We're all scared to challenge these things and to lose those relationships. So just like our leaders are scared, we're scared. Yeah, I would say stand together, and if it's a value, it's really, really worth standing by. It's so beyond worth it. When you're losing relationships or you're losing opportunities, you know, if you're grounded in your values, it really does not matter. What matters is what you value, and I return to that all the time of just, it's beyond me. You know, I look at what my ancestors have sacrificed to be here, and the things that we have now and the culture that we have and the knowledge we have were acts of defiance at one point. And they fought for those spaces to celebrate in secret and to speak their language in secret. And we have to honor that acts of defiance are a part of our culture now, because that's how they showed their love. But we also have to honor that we have shifting times, and we have to honor that having a voice is something our ancestors fought for. So really use it.
Ganesh Cheesh Chloey. Chloey, I said it with like I'm saying it. Chloey. Ganesh Cheesh Chloey. I want to, we're on our last question, our last 3 minutes before we can open it up, but I would love to, David, get your voice back in here. You do a lot of work with nonprofits and things outside of corporations. So for this last question, beyond annual meetings and keeping with the theme of shareholder empowerment, what are some of the ongoing opportunities throughout the year that us as shareholders can do to influence our corporations?
Well, first off, I would love to see a union of Alaska Native shareholders where we get people from every corporation, we get all of our bylaws, and we compare them, we figure out what's working, who has better election cycles, who has, I I know Nana has a lot of village-specific seats where Doyon only requires a certain amount of people from the village, which makes it easier for shareholders across the nation and outside of America even to participate and be involved. There's also, I want to mention, there's those of us who do speak out, it is terrifying to speak out against Native corporations. Speaking out about Nana and what they're doing with their ICE contracts has been one of the most terrifying things I've ever done. But speaking out on those comments on Instagram and Facebook, I meet other shareholders and who like my comment or respond to it, and I'm able to build community with them. It's important to message them and be like, hey, thank you for liking my comment. My name's David. Let's work on this together. Also, there's a lot of media attention that is about to come on a lot of these Doyon, Nana, ASRC. There are reporters who are constantly trying to find people who are willing to speak up. And it is so difficult for journalists to do that because so many people are scared. And when you make these comments, you become available to these reporters. They will find you. And there are people all across the country and the world who want to know what these Native corporations are doing. And we know Nana, our Governor Dunleavy's family is Nana shareholders. Nana and Dunleavy and Trump and the fascist takeover are all connected. And there's so much hiding in these Native corporations. They were created to hide terrible things. Nana is running ICE facilities that people are dying in. And they're calling it Inupiaq values. So the more you're out there, the more you can engage, the more we can get reporters with deep researching tools to find out what is going on. And it's so important, and the more of us speak up, the safer it is.
Goodness, sheesh, David. And can we do one more round of applause for our panel here? I feel like I'm going to be processing the next couple of days just all of the goodness that was shared here. But we do want to go to questions. We still have a little bit of time with our panelists. Okay. And these were, thank you for your burning questions on our poster over there. First one is, with the new enrollment resolutions passing, how best can new shareholders use their voice and become a leader within Native corporations? Seems like one you could answer.
Definitely participating in the meetings hosted by your corporation and any of their subsidiaries. After an annual meeting, any meetings that I've seen, participation falls off. People don't care unless there's door prizes or, giveaways happening. You have to care all the time. It's not a part-time caring thing, especially when you have your corporations like Nana doing things like running ICE detention facilities. This doesn't appear to be common knowledge among a lot of shareholders. And Nana's not alone in that. There are all of our corporations doing shady things that our shareholders may not agree with. And we don't know that if we're not participating, we're not asking the questions, and we're not, paying attention to whether or not they're aligning with those family or those traditional values that we've all adopted. So participation in meetings and definitely raising your voice and asking the hard questions, even when you're not having meetings. Go and ask for those documents. I know that some will make you sign non-disclosure agreements or privacy agreements revolving those. But if you have the information, that's more than enough. So get it.
Mary, you answered one of the next questions that we had. Do we have to sign non-disclosure agreements to receive some information? This is generally different for each corporation, but generally, there will be non-disclosure agreements, and oftentimes it will just be an inspection that you're allowed to do. So they probably won't email you the documents you've requested or give you paper copies, but allow time for you to come into the office to inspect those documents. And I have been through this process several times with my corporation, and I will share that legally, if you're not able to be there in person, you can send someone a proxy, and while you're there, you can make copies. You can do it with your phone, you can take pictures, you can scan documents. They just won't, that's part of your inspection. They just won't make those copies for you. So, great question. And then one more of our burning questions. Chloey, I'm hoping you can answer. The fear and lateral violence when voicing concerns are a tool caused by colonialism. How do you find courage and safety when facing backlash? I know Chloey and David, you both touched on this a little bit, but I think our audience and our participants would love to hear how you find courage and safety. Sweet.
TBD. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's a very real thing, and people's fears are valid. I'm a 5 foot, not very muscly human, and I've had men in leadership and women in leadership snub me, try to reach out to my contracts and make sure I don't find work, make sure I don't find community, tried to make me feel isolated. They're real things, The bullying of our leadership is something that we're actively trying to push against and change, because we don't want leaders that are bullies. We want leaders that uplift us. Where I've found community in it, there are the moments where people do come up and they say, "You're giving me hope. I'm finding my voice." And when someone else shares their voice, I think that's the hope you hold on to, because it isn't just about one person speaking up. It's the hope that it's harder to break and push someone when we're all holding hands, and we have someone to hold us and pull us back when someone's trying to push us away. So I think I find my hope in that is when other people are finding their voice, are starting to speak up, when I'm starting to see the change, when I'm starting to see the possibilities of what a world could look like if our leaders were not scary places to talk to, were not scary places to be a woman, where they were not scary places where you think your voice will create loss for yourself. So I think hope is a big one. Believing in what you're saying is a huge one. I've got a family I have to answer to. I've got a community I have to answer to. And at the end of it all, no money, no titles, no anything is going with me. So I hold on to the fact that I want a better world for my cousins and for my family. And I want women to be able to go in the workforce and not be bullied out, not be harassed. And you hold on to those hopes. Hopes are what are going to push you forward. You assume people know that you love them. Make sure they extra do during these times. Reach out, tell them you care, tell them that you see their voice or you believe in what they're doing. How can I help you? Those are the things that on the dark days when you feel isolated and alone, when someone says, I believe you, it's a powerful, powerful thing that can push away that fear when someone says, I believe you. So more people uplifting, I believe you, I'm with you. Even if I can't be the voice, I'm behind you, I'm next to you, I'm holding your hand. So when you get pushed back, I am with you. Don't let those words fall. Don't let people think they're alone. if you haven't said it out loud, make time to say it out loud, because it makes a big difference.
David, how do you find courage and safety when facing backlash?
Well, as I meet more of my family, I realize that we have a family history of not being able to shut up when we see something wrong. But part of it is, growing up queer and Native, you just learn that some people are never going to like you, and you just have to make peace with that, and you can't bring it into your calculations. And it also comes with being able to live under an oppression that other people aren't understanding and having to do it anyway. Sometimes I think it's compulsive. I don't have a choice, because also I remember being younger and not speaking up when I could have, and feeling shame about that, and I don't want that shame in my life anymore. And it's better to be afraid and doing what's right than to be guilty about things I can't change. And I often think about, we're not just doing this for us and the generations after us. Looking through an Indigenous circular time, we're doing this for ourselves. We will be here again. And if we don't do it now, we are only doing a disservice to ourselves now and, when we come back. And that brings me solace, because it puts it in a greater perspective. It's not just about the future. It's about coming back again and making sure that you're where you need to be.
I want to ask our other panelists too. We would love to hear from you if you'd love to share.
So it's pretty well known in my community that I have a big mouth, and that I am not necessarily scared of hurting people's feelings by telling them the truth. I heard Chloey say something earlier that really resonated with me, and that was about members of boards taking things as personal attacks. This was something I pointed out very regularly when we were trying to confront our board of directors, that they were taking these things as personal attacks. I would frequently state, we know that you're one vote on this board of this many people. This isn't just about you, it's about the board as a whole and the decision that you're coming together to make. Whether you voted in favor of it or not, you were still part of that decision, and you do need to know that people don't agree with that. My intent is never to hurt your feelings in calling you out with things like this. It is to do exactly what they were saying, and that is to draw your attention to what people believe you are doing wrong or incorrectly. It isn't to cancel you. It isn't to throw you out. I personally do not believe that we have a throwaway culture in any of our communities. It is about taking accountability for your actions, and accepting that accountability, making some sort of retribution for those actions that you were a part of. It isn't to throw you out and say you're never welcome again. So I really wish people would get out of this mindset that we are attacking you when we're drawing attention to something that we dislike, and that we don't agree with and don't believe aligns with our values.
So many really intelligent people, and they say stuff and you're like, man, that's resonating with me too. I think David said something that was really just sparked a thought for me. We talk about future generations a lot, and I think that gets away from being active about what we do in the present and for people in the present that are here and that we're impacting. So I think thinking about those things of what can you do now and for the people that are here now, and what can you say now to impact people now that will influence future generations. You grow up and you remember the things that you experienced as a child and that you learned as a child, and that goes into future you. So we have to make active choices and not just think in the future, but that present day of what we can do. And I think when I was hearing Mary speak too, it's just we forget that we had ways to deal with shame, and there's shame in being silent and not speaking up and holding on to that. And there is a shame in being told you're not doing something right. But we had ways to navigate that. You know, you built a shame pole, you made it right. There were ways to make it right. So we need to find those ways again. And often that is making it right, showing up to make it right. Our leaders signed up to take on that responsibility to not just create change, to not just be uplifted, but to make things right for us. So we need them to show up to that accountability.
I think, lateral violence is a really hard thing to navigate. It's something I'm still learning. I actually want to take a step back and go back to Gwich'in Gathering from a couple years ago. And I really liked that instead of that word lateral violence, they were talking about lateral kindness. So I think we start thinking about how to treat one another better and how we could start spreading that as well. And then I think, it's doing what's right. For those of you that don't know, I grew up at Chandeleur Lake. I grew up on the land with my dad and my little brother. So we grew up with a close relationship with the caribou herd and with sheep. And that's all I knew when I was younger, pretty much. And my great-grandparents when I would come to town and them sharing knowledge with me. So I think about how we can preserve those things for the young people, for the next generations, so that they can learn the same things, and passing on those stories, and finding and facing backlash. As long as you know that you're doing what's right within your heart and you believe in what you're doing, that's really important. I was talking to a friend recently, actually, that I went on the Nahanni River with for a rafting trip, and I was talking about salmon because our salmon crash was happening in those first few years, and he at first wasn't understanding, and I kind of had to not yell at him but be stern with him. And he called me earlier this year and he was like, I'm really glad you said that to me because you changed the way I thought about it. And I think it's about doing what's right, making sure that you give people your opinion so they could think about the way you're thinking, and that you hear others in that as well, and so that you can amend the way you're thinking to be better. Because right now, like, none of us are perfect at all, but we can always be better. So let's see.
Okay, Ganesh Chish, thank you all for sharing. I know these are deeply personal journeys and we're not alone. That's the message I'm taking. So we are going to transition to audience and live questions. And I also want to share that there's I feel a lot of percolation in the energy and probably a lot of really good ideas. So I want to share that after we end at 1:30, if you want to stick around and talk to folks in your region or talk to our panelists, that there'll be, I think, lots more time for discussion. Okay. Yeah, this is, for those of you online, this is Doug Modig, one of Native Movement's advisory board members. Yes, Doug, we'd love to hear from you.
So, one of the questions was asking, how do you maintain the courage, if you will, to address our difficult questions? So last night, my wife and I went to the Doyon reception. And what what people don't realize is that 40 years ago, that used to be happy hour. They actually sponsored alcoholism to all of our corporations, not just Doyon, but all of our native corporations. So there are two things that are useful. One of them is to be halfway insane. You need, really, you have to be halfway crazy, because in order to get people to do the right thing, you need to be crazy enough to tell them what the right thing is. And so what we compelled RuleCap back in the day to do was to pass a resolution saying we're not going to serve alcohol in villages. And the corporations says you can't say that. Some of them directly confronted us, my wife and I, about not bringing alcohol. It says, this is how we're going to get our shareholders to come to our meetings. And I said, well, you first got to do the right thing. And the right thing is to be the change that you want to see. So that's part one, is that you got to be crazy enough to be willing to say that. And that's what we did. But 40 years ago is, in one regard, a long time ago. So most of the young people don't remember those days when the shareholder meetings were beer busters. Literally, the first AFN meeting I went to was down at the Captain Cook, and all my leaders were drunk. So I said that is not right. And I was willing to say it in such a way that ultimately they decided to change it. And it's now a national policy. Sounds like a real simple thing, but actually it requires a certain kind of insanity to do that. And now that I'm older, it also helps to be your age. So now I'm an elder, so people listen to me because I'm an elder. But back in the day, they listened to me because I was young and I didn't know any better. I hope.
More questions from our in-person audience?
I heard that my Doyon had was making money by selling carbon footprints, and I read that in the newsletter, and I was very offended that this is such a new way to make money. That they can sell this carbon footprint to companies, and then they can in turn, take license and continue damaging the environment where they are. And I thought, that is so wrong. I couldn't believe that my Doyon would be so proud of doing that, and putting it in the newsletter so all of us, shareholders could read it, anybody in the country. And, but my question was, I'm so glad that this is here, but it's like, I see the Doyon, we do have a Facebook website, but I worried about putting this imprint, with my name, because I didn't want to be targeted, like you brave souls, and this, and I'm a grandma, and I have kids, I have grandkids, and, but it's a very real concern that I want to, and now that, I've had this example, I want to go track that group down, and find out how can we change this mindset. This is not our values. This is not good environmental practice at all. So, and I don't know if that's a question.
Yeah, the things I just want to say to that is I don't agree with the carbon footprint credits that are happening at all either. It feels like a trade-off for other areas to be okay with pollution and environmental harm while buying clean air and clean water in our region to make up for that, when it shouldn't be like that at all. And I don't believe it's part of our values. I think we need to talk about it more. I'd love to sit down with you so we could brainstorm. And I know this is something a lot of other organizations are considering in Alaska too, and corporations. And this is, I think, going to become a bigger issue in the future as well. So I'm really, really grateful that you brought that up. Merci.
And we've got one more response.
So I just want to say I totally understand the concern of carbon credits. It is something that was brought up to our corporation. It is something we're currently looking into. However, I think a way to potentially mitigate those concerns is when we're making these contracts for these carbon credits to put in a timeline in there that that company that's purchasing these carbon credits from us needs to comply with to reduce their carbon footprint that they have and change their practices in that. Otherwise, they don't get the credit on any of their end for our carbon footprint in maintaining our lands without developing them. Just a thought on how we can move forward and potentially make those carbon credit deals a little bit more ethical.
Okay, goodness, sheesh, good questions, and thank you, Doug, for sharing. I'd love to connect more on that. I've had kind of the same revelations of some of our early INCSA leaders being in recovery later in life, and I remember seeing those as personal downfalls or challenges, but it wasn't. It was intentional, the alcoholism. So thank you for bringing that into the space, Ganesh Chish. And then we've got one more question that came in. Did this come in from online, or is this? Do we? Okay. It's a question. Is there a place to follow along with the development of an INCSA shareholder coalition? There's interest in joining. I think this came from David, your comment about potentially organizing shareholders and comparing bylaws and other things. And for now, I don't think that there's a place, but
obviously it would be great to work with Native movement and maybe get it established somehow. So I would say definitely follow, our gracious host here, Native movement. That would be really exciting, especially because these issues are systemic. They're not unique to just one. It's happening with every corporation. So rather than 12 of us trying to solve one problem, all of us can work together and solve what's really going on to its core.
Wonderful. Well, Akela Ganesh Chish, thank you, all of you today for being here. Thank you to our panelists for sharing your knowledge and experience and wisdom. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Like I shared earlier, if you'd like to stick around and we can talk a little bit more, maybe by region or maybe about a possible INCSA coalition, that would be wonderful. And also we have some of these cards floating around at the back table about supporting the native village of Ambler. So please find that. Oh, do we have? Oh, wonderful. Sasha has gifts for our panelists. Thanks, panelists. And thank you for those of you who tuned in virtually today. Like I shared earlier, this will not be our last conversation, so more to come. Ganesh Chish.